Welcome to my channel, and before you leave, listen to this carefully. What if the dream you keep calling impossible is not too far away at all, but simply waiting for the version of you who finally stops saying tomorrow? One day, you could wake up and discover that the life you wanted did not disappear because you lacked talent. It disappeared because you kept postponing the first step. That thought sounds painful, but it can also be powerful, because if delay is the problem, action can become the answer. There was once a young person with a dream that filled their mind every night. They imagined becoming confident, skilled, successful, and proud of their life. They made plans, watched inspiring videos, wrote goals, and promised that everything would change soon. But every morning, another excuse appeared. They were tired. They needed better conditions. They needed more confidence. They would begin after one more day of rest. The first turning point came when they noticed that their dream was growing older while their excuses stayed the same. One evening, they sat alone and asked, "How long am I going to keep waiting for a perfect moment?" The question was uncomfortable because they already knew the answer. No perfect moment was coming. Life would always contain problems, responsibilities, fear, and uncertainty. So, the next morning, they made one small decision. They got out of bed before their usual time and worked on the most important task for 30 minutes. Nothing magical happened. Nobody applauded. Yet, something important changed. They had finally kept a promise to themselves. The second turning point came when they realized that confidence does not always arrive before action. Sometimes action creates confidence. They had spent years waiting to feel brave enough to begin, but now they began while still afraid. They opened the book, practiced the skill, and accepted that their first attempt might be weak. It was weak, but it was real. For the first time, they understood that an imperfect beginning is stronger than a perfect plan that never starts. The third turning point came when motivation disappeared. After several productive days, they woke up tired and wanted to return to old habits. The excitement was gone. The dreams suddenly felt distant. But instead of asking, "Do I feel motivated?" they asked, "What needs to be done today?" That question changed their routine. They learned that discipline means continuing a meaningful action even when emotion is not helping. They did not force themselves to become a machine. They rested when they truly needed rest, but they stopped using ordinary discomfort as a reason to quit. The fourth turning point came when they stopped trying to change their entire life overnight. Their old plans had always been enormous, and enormous plans often collapsed under their own weight. This time, they chose one habit, one task, and one promise. They would improve a little each day. A single page became a study session. A short practice became a skill. One controlled morning became a better week. They began seeing progress as something built, not something discovered. Then came the fifth turning point. Someone close to them questioned the dream. The words hurt because they came from a person whose opinion mattered. For a moment, doubt returned. Maybe the dream really was too large. Maybe the other person was right. But instead of arguing, they decided to let time and effort answer. They stopped explaining every goal and started protecting their attention. They realized that not everyone needs to understand your destination. Sometimes you must walk quietly until your results can speak. The sixth turning point arrived with failure. After weeks of work, an important result was disappointing. The old version of them would have taken the failure as proof that they were not good enough. This time, they studied it. They asked what went wrong, what could improve, and what the mistake was teaching. The results still hurt, but it no longer controlled them. Failure had changed from a wall into a teacher. And then, just when they thought they were becoming stronger, life placed a much harder test in front of them. The seventh turning point began when they looked backward instead of only looking ahead. They remembered the days they had already survived, the fears they had already faced, and the moments when they had started again. They were not where they wanted to be, but they were no longer where they had been. That realization gave them a new kind of hope. They understood that a mountain looks impossible when you only stare at the summit. But when you take one step, then another, the distance slowly becomes a journey. They took another breath, returned to the work, and chose to continue without surrender. The next morning, the person faced a new problem. They wanted progress, but they still wanted comfort more. The eighth turning point came when they understood that waiting for the perfect day was another form of delay. There would always be unfinished responsibilities, unexpected problems, tired mornings, and reasons to postpone. If they waited until everything felt right, they might wait forever. So they stopped asking whether the day was perfect and started asking whether the next action was possible. Sometimes it was only 20 minutes of study. Sometimes it was one practice session. Sometimes it was simply organizing the next day. Small action became their way of refusing delay. The ninth turning point arrived when they learned that excuses could sound intelligent. I need more time. I need better equipment. I need more confidence. I will begin after things settle down. None of these statements sounded like excuses, but they were still keeping the dream at a distance. The person began separating real limits from comfortable reasons. If something truly could not be done today, they found another useful step. If they could not complete the whole task, they completed part of it. If they could not solve the entire problem, they learned one piece. This changed their relationship with obstacles. A problem no longer meant stop. It meant adjust. The 10th turning point came when they discovered the danger of negative self-talk. After every mistake, they had been telling themselves, I always fail, or I am not good enough. Those sentences felt powerful because they were repeated so often, but repetition did not make them true. So they changed the language inside their mind. Instead of saying, I cannot do this, they said, I cannot do this yet. Instead of, I failed, they said, this attempt taught me something. The situation had not changed, but their response had. Slowly, their mind became a place where learning was possible instead of a place where every mistake became a punishment. The 11th turning point came when they realized that growth required effort, not endless thinking. They had spent too much time imagining success and too little time doing the work that could create it. Now they created focused periods where distractions were removed. The phone went away. Unnecessary conversations stopped. One task received full attention. With practice, focus became stronger. They learned that talent can open a door, but consistent effort keeps you moving through it. Then, the 12th turning point arrived. Progress became slow again. The person was working, yet the results were not arriving as quickly as they hoped. This was the moment when many people would quit. They wondered whether the effort was worth it. But they remembered that growth is often invisible before it becomes obvious. A seed can spend weeks underground before anyone sees a leaf. Their work could be doing the same thing. It could be building knowledge, discipline, patience, and confidence beneath the surface. So they continued even without immediate proof. The 13th turning point came when they learned to protect their health. They had once believed that working harder meant sleeping less, ignoring stress, and pushing through every warning from their body. Eventually, exhaustion made everything harder. They understood that a strong future cannot be built by destroying the person who must reach it. They began sleeping better, taking proper breaks, eating more carefully, and giving their mind time to recover. Rest was no longer seen as laziness. It became part of preparation. They learned that discipline includes knowing when to stop for the day so you can return with strength tomorrow. The 14th turning point came when another person succeeded faster. The comparison returned, but this time it did not last. The person reminded themselves that different lives have different starting points, resources, responsibilities, and timelines. Someone else's speed did not make their own progress meaningless. Instead of becoming jealous, they studied what they could learn. Their attention returned to their own path. That decision created freedom. They only needed to keep improving their own life. Then the 15th turning point arrived during an ordinary evening. The person opened an old notebook and saw the goals they had written months earlier. Some were unfinished, but several had changed. They were studying differently, thinking differently, speaking differently, responding to problems differently. They suddenly realized that the biggest result was not yet the achievement they wanted. It was the person they were becoming while chasing it. The dream had forced them to build patience, courage, focus, and self-trust. They closed the notebook with a quiet smile knowing the journey was still long, but also knowing something had changed forever. They no longer needed to wait for a perfect future before becoming serious about today. The person thought the hardest part was beginning, but soon discovered that continuing was a different kind of battle. Starting had required courage, but staying consistent required patience. Some mornings felt powerful, while others felt empty. There were days when the work seemed exciting, and days when every task felt heavy. Then a deeper lesson appeared. Progress does not always feel like progress while you are living through it. Sometimes growth feels boring because it is built from repetition. The person began accepting ordinary days instead of demanding constant excitement. They understood that a dream cannot depend on feeling inspired every morning. It needs routines strong enough to survive ordinary moods. They also learned that patience was not passive waiting. It was active trust supported by daily effort. They could not control every result, but they could control whether they showed up, learned from each attempt, and remained faithful to their chosen direction. One afternoon, an unexpected rejection arrived. An opportunity they had wanted was given to someone else. The old fear returned immediately. Maybe they were not talented enough. Maybe all the effort had been wasted. Maybe they should choose an easier dream. But they refused to make a permanent decision during a temporary disappointment. They allowed themselves to feel hurt, then asked what could be learned. They discovered that rejection had revealed weaknesses they could improve. Their work needed more skill. Their preparation needed more depth. Their communication needed to become clearer. Instead of treating the closed door as an insult, they treated it as information. That choice became another quiet victory. As weeks passed, the person became more serious about their time. They noticed how easily hours disappeared through endless scrolling, pointless arguments, and conversations that added nothing to their future. They simply became selective. If something helped them learn, recover, connect, or move forward, it earned attention. If it repeatedly stole their focus, they reduced it. They learned that saying no to distraction was sometimes more important than saying yes to another opportunity. A full schedule could still produce an empty life if the important things were missing. Then a difficult morning arrived. They woke up exhausted and wanted to abandon everything. No one would have known if they skipped the work. Nobody was forcing them to continue. That was exactly why the moment mattered. They realized that character is built most strongly when nobody is watching. They did not demand a huge performance from themselves. They simply completed the next useful action, then another. By the end of the day, the problem had not disappeared, but their confidence had grown because they had proved that a difficult mood did not have to control a meaningful decision. Another lesson came through a mistake. The person trusted the wrong advice and lost valuable time. Instead of becoming bitter, they learned to check information, ask better questions, and think independently. They understood that confidence without judgment can create new problems. Learning to listen was important, but learning what to listen to was equally important. From that point forward, they stopped accepting every opinion as truth. They respected experienced people, welcomed useful correction, and still took responsibility for their own choices. Eventually, a small success arrived. It felt different because they knew what had created it. It came from many quiet mornings, repeated practice, corrected mistakes, protected time, and moments when they had continued without applause. The success gave them confidence, but it also gave them perspective. They realized that big results often look sudden only because people cannot see the years of preparation underneath them. Now, they faced a new question. What would happen when the goal was finally reached? They understood that success could not be the end of learning. A person who stops growing after one achievement begins moving backward. So they decided to treat every achievement as a doorway instead of a finish line. They would remain curious, keep improving, and continue building useful skills. The most important change was inside their identity. They no longer described themselves as someone who was trying to become disciplined. They had become someone who practiced discipline. They no longer said they were waiting for confidence. They were creating confidence through action. They no longer saw their past as a prison. They saw it as evidence that people can change. And then Just when life seemed to be settling into a steady rhythm, another opportunity appeared. It was larger than anything they had faced before, but it carried a serious risk. Accepting it could change their future, yet it would demand courage they had never needed before. The person stood quietly, thinking about every lesson, every failure, and every promise that had brought them this far. It had been about becoming strong enough to move while fear was still present. They took a breath, looked toward the uncertain road ahead, and stepped forward. The opportunity did not come with a guarantee. It came with uncertainty, pressure, and the possibility of failure. The person knew that stepping forward could change everything, but staying where they were would also have a cost. They had spent too long dreaming about a different life to let fear make the final decision. So they accepted the challenge, not because they believed they were ready for everything, but because they had learned that readiness grows through action. The first days were difficult. Problems appeared faster than expected, and several plans failed. Yet, instead of panicking, they returned to the habits that had carried them before. They understood that a person who keeps learning can eventually solve problems that once looked impossible. There were moments when the pressure became intense. They wondered whether they had chosen a road that was too difficult. But then they remembered the person they had been months earlier, waiting for confidence, perfect conditions, and someone else to believe in them. That person had wanted change without discomfort. Now they understood that discomfort was part of becoming different. Eventually, the challenge produced a result. It was not perfect, but it was meaningful. They had succeeded in something that once seemed far beyond their ability. Instead of celebrating only the result, they celebrated the process that made it possible. They remembered every early morning, every mistake, every rejection, every focused session, and every time they had chosen to continue. But the most powerful lesson came afterward. They realized that reaching one goal did not remove insecurity. They decided that they would never make their identity depend entirely on one result. A good result could encourage them, and a bad result could teach them, but neither would decide their worth. They also began helping people who were standing where they once stood. They shared the lesson their journey had taught them. You do not need proof that you will succeed before you begin. You need enough courage to make the next honest attempt. Years later, the person could finally see the full picture. The dream had mattered, but the transformation had mattered more. The goal had given them direction, while the struggle had given them character. So, if you are watching this while feeling behind, remember what this journey reveals. You only need to stop surrendering your future to excuses. Start with what you have. Learn the skill you can practice. Fix the mistake you can correct. Take the opportunity you can reach. Then, repeat. Your life may not change dramatically tomorrow, but your direction can change today. A small step toward your future is better than another year standing still. Do not measure your worth by one exam, one rejection, one failure, or one difficult season. Those moments are chapters, not the whole story. They also learn that success should never become an excuse to stop learning. Every achievement created a new responsibility. Instead of asking how to protect what they had gained, they asked how to use it wisely. They remained curious, listened to useful advice, and kept practicing. This kept success from becoming a finish line. It became another starting point. More importantly, they never forgot the difficult days that had shaped them. Those days reminded them to stay humble when things went well and hopeful when things went badly. They knew that every season would change, and they wanted their character to remain steady through all of them. One day, you may look back at the version of yourself who was afraid to begin and feel grateful that you finally moved. You may realize that the biggest breakthrough was not the day everyone noticed your success. It was the quiet day when you chose not to quit. That was the day your future started becoming different. So, keep going. Dream boldly, but accept that progress takes time. Learn from mistakes without allowing them to define you. Rest when you need to, then return. Most importantly, remember that your future self is being built by today's choices. The person in this story did not become stronger because life became easier. They became stronger because they learned how to respond when life was hard. That ability is available to you too. You can begin again, you can learn again, you can try again. You can become more disciplined, more skilled, more confident, and more capable than you are today. Your story is not finished, and your current situation does not have the final word. Keep taking the next step. Keep believing that growth is possible. Keep giving yourself another chance. Because sometimes the life you dream about begins with one simple decision. I will not wait anymore. I will start today. Your next step may be small, but it can become the beginning of everything meaningful.